And part of that assessment involves putting together secondary data indicators from public data sources to help inform community strategies and grant making, and being able to provide a reliable resource for data at the county or school district or census tract or zip code level. That's really a big task if done well, and to have reliable, up-to-date information. And so we found a group out of the University of Missouri called the Center for Applied Research and Engagement System, or CARES. And CARES works with dozens of different networks around the country, health networks, community action programs, 4-H, and others, to help develop these data hubs. And the data hubs are a customizable website that community networks can use to come together to discuss issues that are important in their area. And what CARES does is they really curate the data and provide a platform and data updates to make sure that the data are relevant and current. So today we're going to have a presentation from Jamie. She's right here from University of Missouri. I'm going to turn over to her in just one second. I know Jamie is recording this this webinar, so you'll be able to see it up at the site, inlandnorthwestinsights.org, and you'll be able to come back to it and share it with your colleagues. So we can cover as much information as possible. I'm probably going to wait and do questions at the end, if that sounds okay. If you'd like to send me questions in the chat box, I'll monitor those, and I can ask Jamie. We'll leave 10 or 15 minutes at the end for questions. In addition, if there's any follow-up, you can contact myself. I'm happy to go through some of the functions that we may have missed, or you may have more questions about. Jamie and her team have been really good at providing training and support so that we can really utilize this platform more effectively. So with that, I would just ask everyone to maybe mute their microphone, and I'm going to turn it over to Jamie. Thanks so much, Jamie.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction, Mason. So as Mason said, my name is Jamie Kleinsorge. I'm a project coordinator here at the Center for Applied Research and Engagement Systems, also known as CARES, on the University of Missouri campus. And really delighted to be joining you all over on the West Coast today to talk a little bit about this data hub that we've been working on building, like Mason said, over the last year and a half or so. I'm showing my screen. Hopefully everyone can see it. And as Mason said, if anybody has any questions, or if you'd like me to go back and demonstrate something a second time, happy to do that towards the end of the webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn off my video just to make sure that we can all focus on the screen here that we've got up front. So you can follow along if you're interested in doing so. The URL you can see up here at the top of my screen is inlandnorthwestinsights.org. So if you type that in, it should bring you right here to this home page. And currently, to access most of these resources and tools, you don't need to be logged in, but there are a few things that will show you that do require some login to be able to access. And so what you can see here is that we've just landed here on the home page, and it talks a little bit about the area that it covers, so the geography that we're focusing on here within this data hub. There's also some direct links, for example, to the mapping tool, the community assessment report. We did a previous training webinar that you can watch here as well. And then there's some information and links to some of the sponsors or folks that are supporting this work, the Lewis and Clark Healthcare Foundation, Innovia, the Idaho Community Foundation, and Primera Social Impact. And you can see those also on the partners page. If you do want to get back in touch with us here at CARES, if you have any technical questions or have any other needs, you can click this link here and it'll get you right to our website as well. So first, I just want to kind of walk through a little bit of the site itself and show you some of the navigation that's available. It looks like we might have a question, and I just want to make oh, okay, great. There is a little bit broader area here, and we'll show you in the map room how you can look across states and across geographies. So here, just under this About page, you'll see that there's a little bit more information about the community partners itself, about the folks that are behind this hub and that are doing work on this hub. And then there's also some news and updates available as well. So you can see those. Those are fed, and we have just a little bit of maybe my internet's not quite working. Can you guys still see and hear me okay? Hopefully.
I can hear you, but I
Okay,
don't
great.
see.
Yeah. So let me get back to the home page here. Sure. Looks like maybe.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, sometimes Campus is pretty good about making the internet work, but sometimes it's not. So here under, just again, looking through some of the navigation, we have an about section. So looking at community partners and some news and updates. We also have a section around Map My Community. And so we're going to be spending some time here in the map room today, exploring how to access the different data layers that we have available. As Mason mentioned, we have about 33,000 data layers available within our public map room. And that spans across really a really wide variety of data domains. So we do have a lot of information focused on health. We do work with a lot of health systems, hospital systems, and other health-related community groups. And so looking at health outcomes, health behaviors, morbidity and mortality indicators, those kinds of things. We also have a lot of social determinants, so things about your physical environment, transportations and roadways, access to different types of providers and services. We have a lot of environmental data, so if you're looking at or interested in any sort of climate impacts or historical weather data, you can find that there as well, in addition to some economic data. So how well are we doing in terms of unemployment, job creation, those kinds of things. So all of those are available here within the map room. We also have a build a report area, and we'll dive into this community assessment tool. And this is really a starting point. If you've ever been involved or are interested in getting involved in the community needs assessment process, what you'll find here is what you can find as secondary data to support that process. So what does your community look like in terms of population trends? What are the demographics? Are there folks that are moving in, moving out from different racial and ethnicity groups or different age groups? What does that look like? And that community assessment tool can be a very good way to help you prioritize needs in your community. Mason will talk a little bit about what's under this resources tab, but there's some local resources that you can access here and some survey results. And then there's this contact us page. Obviously, you can reach out to get support from us as well. So I'm going to see if I can open up the home page here again. Great. And we're going to start just by going here to this. So if you click on Map My Community, what you'll see is if you're not familiar with or you aren't super comfortable with making maps online, this is a great place to start. So here you can see getting started with community mapping. And what we've done here is we've built what we call starter maps. So you can click on any of these maps and it'll preload some layers for you. And it's just really a good entry point into learning how to make maps. So if you do take this information and resources back to others in your organizations, this is a good place to point them if they aren't quite yet ready to make a map from scratch. If you do, in fact, though, want to make a map from scratch, under this Map My Community tab, you'll see that there was a nice little drop down that says Map Room. And so by clicking on that map room button, what's going to happen is it's going to bring you into our national map room, but it's going to be focused on the Inland Northwest Insights area here. And so this is our search data window. So as I mentioned, we have about 33,000 data layers in here from about 235 different national secondary sources. So one of the key things that we values that we feel like we provide is rather than having to go to the census website and then go to American Fact Finder and then go to the Department of Labor to find different data points, we've sort of aggregated those all here for you and hopefully made it easy for you to find those all in one place. So the first way to search for data I'm going to show you is this browse by topic. So underneath the keyword search, you'll notice there are two buttons. First one is browse by topic. So you can see here we have things like civic social. Here you can find information, for example, around crime, incarceration rates, law enforcement, property crime. And as I click through these carrots, so simply by clicking this down arrow here, I can get down to those individual layers in which I can add to a map. You'll see that as I hover over each of them, I can click the checkbox next to it, and that would help me add it to the map. There's also a little information button that pops up as well. And I want to point this out because although here at CARES we're very familiar with data and data sources and methodology, we recognize that folks across the country don't get to spend nearly as much time as we do actually working with individual data layers. But it's important to know what it is that you're adding to the map and asking yourself, is this the right data layer? Is this going to tell me what it is that I'm actually looking for? So if I click this nice little information button or I button next to each data layer, you'll see what happens is this pop-up produces. And so it gives me a description of the data layer itself. It tells me when it was released. It tells me the geographic unit. This one, it says unknown for the release cycle. And so this just means that it might have been a one-time data published just one time. But you know, for things like the American Community Survey or census data, we have a release cycle for those on an annual or a 5-year basis. Here, this is available at the county level. And then we have a link back to the original source and a source description. So if you are wondering where it came from, or you wanted some additional information about the methodology or collection methods, you could get back to that original source very quickly. So we really pride ourselves on making sure that you can get back to those original data sources and get more information if you're interested. So as you can see, those little information buttons pop up for every single one of the data layers that we have available, and they follow that same sort of template, right? Release date, a little bit about the data layer itself, geographic unit, and then information about the data source. So one way to get familiar with what we have available or what's available within this map room is to really just click through a lot of these carrots and see what maybe comes up or interests you. There's a lot of data in here, and there are things that we add to this list every single day. And so would recommend that you get more familiar just by clicking through some of these carrots and seeing what's available in terms of the actual individual data layers that can be added to a map. The second way to search is to browse by source. And so we looked at browse by topic. Now, if I browse by source, what you'll see here is that we have actual data sources themselves. And so if you are looking for example, you know, a layer related to agriculture from the United States Department of Agriculture, you could scroll down to USDA here. You can see all of these different data sources. As I scroll down, you'll see that I end up with some USDA layers, and I can look and see if the actual data layer that I'm looking for lies underneath that data source or not. This one has a lot of carrots to get down to the individual data layer level. So again, you can use this, and I also encourage people just to take some time to explore this list, because there's really just a lot of different types of data sources that give us a lot of really great information. One of the things that I scrolled past here was that I know is of interest across the nation is broadband. So we've got some interesting broadband data. So here are some of the national broadband maps that we have available. And you can see here that we've got information about different types of broadband speeds, what's available, wired versus wireless. And so that's just one example of a new data layer that we've added based on interest in an emerging topic here in Missouri and across the nation, really. So here, the last way to search, and probably the most common way to search, is going to be to search by keyword. So I'm simply going to type in a word like poverty, and what you're going to see here is I have about 363 different layers that populate related to poverty. So that can be a little bit overwhelming, but poverty is one of those indicators where we do have multiple sources of poverty information. So we do have some that come from the American Community Survey, and then some from SAPE, which is a small area estimate. We also have multiple years. So you can see here that we have historical data from the ACS back to 2009. And then we also have poverty information at different poverty levels and for different ages and population groups. And so that's really why we get that very large number here. So we can select, though, let's look at some population below poverty for children age 0 to 17. And so I can filter my search by typing in poverty and children. And you'll see now I get about 104 results, which is a little bit more manageable, right? So here I can select a layer, finally. The big part of the show here in terms of the map room is actually selecting a layer to add to the map. And so I do that simply by clicking the checkbox next to the layer that I'm interested in. So once I see that that's active, I can click this button down here at the bottom that says Add to Map. And what's going to happen here is, as you can see, it automatically populates then that poverty layer onto the map. And this is already zoomed into the extent of sort of Idaho and Washington area. And so you can zoom in and zoom out, though, using these plus and minus buttons over here on the left-hand side. So if I wanted to zoom out and see all of Idaho and all of Oregon and Washington, I could do that very easily, or I could zoom into a very specific area. You can see also up here on the right-hand side, I can enter a location. And so this search bar is really very flexible. You could enter a county, a zip code, a city name, or a state, and it's going to pull it up here. So I could start to type in Moscow, Idaho, which I know is an area over here, and you can see what happens, and it automatically zooms me in to that area as well. So I'm going to zoom back out just a little bit. And I'm going to show you a few more features that we have here within the map room. So in addition to using these plus and minus buttons, I did want to mention that you can move around by dragging and dropping the map, just like you would a Google Doc or a file. So that works just the same way in doing that as well. So wanted to mention that, especially if you have a mouse or you're on your laptop, it might be easier that way. In addition, I want to point out the legend here on the right-hand side. And so this is really our control center over here. And it's going to tell us, first off, it shows us the actual data layer that we have displayed here on the map. So we're looking at population below poverty, 200% for children aged 12 to 17. And this is the most recent American Community Survey data we have, 2013 to 2017. And so you can see here we have this nice color ramp that tells us a little bit for those areas. It looks like a lot of the areas that we're looking at here fall somewhere between that 20 and 60%. And you can also change the data geography and the data type. Before I do that, though, I did want to point out that I always want to encourage people to actually click the map. And so if I click the map, what it's going to do here is it's going to give me actual values, which can be important, right? Because we do our best to create these the legends and the color ramps to display the variation in things like poverty. But it's always important to know exactly, what is that number of children living in poverty? So you can see here, if I click the map, it's going to select the county that I'm interested in. It's going to tell me the county name so I can assure myself that I'm in the right county. It gives me that actual percentage here. So the population age 12 to 17 is about 38.3% or 0.4% that are living in poverty. It also gives me a margin of error, which can be very helpful, especially in those rural areas where margin of error may be higher. We can get an actual total number, and then we can also get the total population there as well. So I would encourage you at any time to click the map so you can get the actual values themselves. Because I always like to ask myself the question, if I find an area that's under 20% or over 80%, how far over 80% or how far under 20%? And that can really help you answer some of those harder questions there. Okay, back to our legend here in the right-hand side, what you'll see is that right now we're looking at this information at a county level. But county level is not always the most interesting or the most granular that we have available. So here you can see if I click on that data layer, we have it available also at a state level, a place level, which is going to look at mostly the most populated or metropolitan areas, so city level, census tract level, ZCTA, which is going to be our zip codes, and then PUMA, which is a public use micro area. And we don't use or see a lot of people use PUMAs a lot, but it is available. So for example, if I were to select tract, you can see how the map automatically changes. So now I'm looking at same data layer, population below 200% of poverty for children by a tract level, which can be much more meaningful, right, as we're doing work in and around smaller communities or again in rural areas. So I can start to see some more granularity here. And in this area, this Pullman area, it looks like there may be a higher rate of children in poverty. So it looks about 67% or so. I can click this other darker area over here and it looks like we have a high margin of error. So we probably want to look at that more at a county level rather than a tract level. But yeah, as you can see, we get those actual values here, which can be very helpful. The other thing that you can do here is you can change the data type. So right now we're looking at it at a percent instead of total. So we're looking at the number of children divided by the total population of children. And so that gives us our percent. But we can also look at total numbers. So as you can see here, that changes the map to this wonderfully pink and purple color. But nonetheless, again, it gives us an idea about a little bit more granularity. We can, again, click that area around Pullman and see sort of what that number is, around 34% there. And we could also look at it at a zip code level. So you can see, again, how the map changes based on those zip codes. So a couple of other items to note here is that you can label this information. So if you did want to see the values themselves, so we're looking at total numbers, so it's going to show us total numbers. I could change it to percent also, and you'll see how the map changes if I do that, and the labels will change as well. And we also have the availability then to add additional data to this map. So one of the things that can be really powerful is being able to look at different data layers in collaboration with one another, right? And so I'm going to go back here to my original layer. And what I can do now is up here on the left-hand side, there's this button that says Add Data. And so I can click the Add Data button here, and I can add, for example, we're going to look at Head Start facilities. And so here you can see we have about 6 different results for Head Start facilities. We have different designations, some child care centers that come up, and I'm just going to go ahead and click All Facilities, and that's for the year of 2018. I'm going to go ahead and add those to the map, and what you'll see here is now that we'll have some dots that show up on the map that represent these Head Start facilities. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so we can see sort of how those populate here on the map, and you can see that we've got these nice little yellow dots that show up. And at this time, because the yellow doesn't show up quite as well, I can actually turn down sort of the transparency using this slider on the population below poverty level and be able to see some of those Head Start facilities a little bit better. Again, I would encourage you to click on the map, and what will happen here is then you'll get some information about the Head Start facility itself. We get the name, the address, it looks like a program. Is it a Head Start facility? Does it serve these individual populations, yes or no? So that's some nice additional information. So once you have made a map like this, you can start to identify, for example, maybe areas where you would consider a childcare desert. That's something that folks have talked about a lot across communities that we've worked with, where you may not be able to access a licensed childcare facility for many miles, or if there's not transportation options to get there, or it may take just a very long time, right? So there could be some childcare deserts you could address with some additional childcare facilities or some additional funding. You can also do some additional advanced mapping once you get to this point as well. So if you're happy with sort of the layers that you've added to your map here, you'll notice up here in the left-hand corner, we have a tools button, and then there's also a tools bar down here at the bottom. And when I click on that, what's going to happen is you'll see that it opens up a variety of advanced mapping tools that we have available. So the first one that I want to highlight is this query data. I think this is a pretty cool feature that we have. And so here you can see I'm querying Head Start facilities. And for example, if I wanted to look for just those that are designated for American Indian or Alaskan Native, I can choose that. And here I would click equals and yes, because it's asking a question, do they serve those populations? And what's going to happen is it's going to run the query on the current map extent. And now we have, it looks like 3 results, 2 or 3 results found, where you see the dots turn from yellow to red. And that means that these facilities meet our query. So these are facilities that serve American Indian and Native Alaskan populations. And so I can hover over them and get that same metadata information. Or down here, you can see that I can make an attribute table. So I can click that show attributes, and it's going to create this nice little table for me. And again, I think this is really powerful if you are doing on the ground sort of community organizing type of work. You want to identify stakeholders, potential partners, facilities that you want to reach out to for programming. This can be really powerful in being able to do that very quickly and making sure that they meet those certain criteria that you're looking for. Here I can click this download data button, and it would give me an Excel file that would show these facilities as well. And so again, it makes it a nice, easy transition to have that sort of in hand. In addition to the query data tool, we also have a select data tool. So if you are looking for a raw data download or to pull some data down, you can do that pretty easily using the select data tool. So I'm actually going to change from looking at Head Start facilities to looking at that poverty layer here, percent by tract. And then I have a couple of options. This rectangle option is probably the easiest. Here, as you scroll over the map, you can see it says press down to start and let go to finish. And basically, you're just kind of creating a nice little square. And it's going to select all the census tracts that fall within that square that I've selected. And you'll see here, again, that I get this nice attribute table. So it looks like I covered about 32 different census tracts with that rectangle. And then I can click Show Attributes. And what's going to happen here is, again, it gives me this nice data table that tells me the population below 200% of poverty for each of those 32 census tracts. I can download that data to an Excel file. And if you wanted to do some additional analysis, or create your own charts and dials with this information, you could do that very easily. Pull it into another data analysis program like Stata or SPSS, whatever your heart desires there. So that's the select data tool. We also have some measurement tools. So if you are interested, the example I typically use, let's see if we can come up with any farmers markets in this area. We can measure paths or measure areas. Here it looks like maybe if we wanted to look at the distance between, for example, a Head Start facility and a farmer's market, thinking about placement of farmer's markets. Let me go back up here really quickly. We could see that we can use that measure tool to say, oh, we want to measure a path between this area and this area here, and it looks like it's about 21 miles that someone would have to travel from that Head Start facility to access a farmer's market in a nearby area. This is also helpful if you ever need a geographic coordinate. You can just drop a pin, or you can measure an area. So for folks that may be interested in measuring acreage of any kind, you can do that very easily by, again, just drawing a polygon, and it's going to tell you, I selected a very large area, so a very large amount of acres, the number of miles, those kinds of things. So I'll clear that out. One note there, that if you're interested in any of those measurement tools, if we go back to our map layers, you'll notice that there are two buttons up here, the main layers, and then there's some reference layers. And I can click this second hamburger menu here, and you'll notice that we have things like highways that you can easily add to the map. Things like state and county boundaries. So if you did want to label the counties that you're looking at, you can do that very easily. But down here at the bottom, then we do also have a satellite map. So if you did want to zoom in very closely down to a very specific area, again, and use some of those measurement tools, it makes it much easier, and you'll probably get a much more reasonable amount of acreage than I did just a minute ago. But you can see that nice plot of land then is about 18 acres. And so there's some value in being able to access those tools. We also have some graphics tools. So if you ever wanted to draw a circle and highlight an area, or put in a nice arrow to highlight a specific area, you can do that and change the color as well. So there's some nice graphic tools there. We have a mask tool, which can be very useful when you're working on maybe pulling a map, or pulling this into a PowerPoint presentation or a grant application or something of the like. And you want to highlight just a very specific area. So what I can do here, using this mask tool, is I can say that I want to look at just a very specific county. So we'll look here at Clearwater County, and you can see what happens is it sort of masks out the area around Clearwater County. So I can sort of change the transparency and say I want to see some of those counties around it, or I can hide them completely, and you can see that it just then highlights that one county that I'm interested in. You can do that with other geographies as well, zip code, school districts, state house and senate districts, or your congressional district. So that's a pretty nice tool to be able to use, again, for presentations. We do have some swipe layers and walk scores available, and we don't have time to get into some of these tools, but they are available, and there are some support materials that help you with those. So once you're done, or you feel like you've made a good map, there's a couple of options of what you can do. Here up in the right-hand corner is a share button, so you can see that you can share this map very easily to social media, via email, or you can get a quick map link. The nice part about the map link is that you can share it with someone, and it'll bring them right back here, and they're able to interact with the data just like you've done. It won't mess up your map. It'll retain the integrity of your map, but they will be able to add layers or move to different locations. You can also export the map then as a PNG, so an image file, or as a PDF document. We have some options here of landscape versus portrait, and then the map image only and legend image only. And again, these are very nice when it comes to thinking about putting these map images into like a PowerPoint presentation or into a Word document of some kind. We also have the help button up here. So if you do forget everything that I talked about here on the webinar today, there's kind of a nice little cheat sheet of how to add data to the map and how to move around in the map room. So that's really a quick overview of the mapping tool. Again, you can add all kinds of data here. So just like I did with those farmers markets, We could add schools. We could add other types of base layers. The possibilities are really endless within the map room, and it really gives you the opportunity to sort of start to look at whether there are relationships between things like housing cost burden and transportation, or environmental impacts and weather events, those kinds of things. So lots and lots of possibilities here in the map room. So I'm going to pause for just a second. It looks like we may have had some chats come through, so I just want to check. It looks like, oh, yep. And Mason's getting those, so they're good. It looks like somebody had asked about adding a road layer. We do have roads in the add data here, but as I mentioned, we also have these nice reference layers where you can turn on highways, and it's really helpful for most folks to be able to see those roads, because seems like everybody knows where they are sort of in relation, right, to the nearest highway, interstate, that sort of thing. So these reference maps can be very helpful. All right, so moving on, one other thing about the map room that I wanted to highlight is this what's new in maps section here. And so if you ever are wondering sort of what are some of those new data layers that we've added to the map room, or something that maybe we've updated, you can find that information right here in this data, in this feed. So this is automatically updated. So you can see here, it looks like we've been adding a lot of infrastructure, transmission lines, coal fields, natural gas, those types of things. If I load more, you'll see down here, it looks like we've got some locations of primary care physicians, locations of addiction and substance abuse providers, local law enforcement. So we've been doing a lot of acquisition to try to get more information about the opioid epidemic, and so we have been focusing on some of that addiction and substance abuse data as well. So just wanted to point that out in case you're ever wondering sort of what's new or what's been updated. You can see right here what's new in maps. The next area that we're going to spend some time on is really this build a report area. And so you can see here that there's a nice overview that talks a little bit about the indicators that are included in this specific community health report. Covers a couple different domains, social and economic factors, health outcomes, those types of things. And so if you have any questions about the selection of indicators, you can find more information here. Now, to actually access the tool, what you can see is we have this community assessment tool link. And so I'm just going to go ahead and click that. So this is the first step. There's 3 basic steps to creating a community health needs assessment or a community needs assessment here through this reporting tool. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to select your location. So again, really thinking about our geography. Are we interested in looking at health indicators at a county level? Or maybe you work in a region that makes up several counties. Or maybe you were looking for just a population area, like a zip code or a series of zip codes. And we can do all of that here. So the first thing that you'll see is that we can select a state. So for example, if I wanted to select Idaho, I could select a couple of counties within Idaho. So I can select one or more counties, and that would create my report location. We also have a couple of other, also if I wanted to go back and cross state lines, so for some people this is really important, I could select another county here, and you can see then I've selected 2 counties in Idaho and 1 in Oregon. So you can cross those state lines. If at any time you've made an incorrect selection, you can select or click the X next to the selection that you want to get rid of, and it'll all go away there. So this is really the county and state-based option up here. We also have a foundation region option. So because some of the supporters of this site were foundations that cover a variety of counties, we've pre-populated those. So you can see here that if you wanted to select the Idaho Community Foundation region, you could do that. You could combine it with the Innovia Foundation and have an even larger area. So those are all available to you pre-populated. And then we also have a draw my area function. And so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go back and I'm going to create a report at a county level so you can see what that looks like. And then we'll create a second report that looks at a more granular area that's not county specific. So again, I'm just going to select a couple of areas here in Idaho. And so I've selected 2 counties, and I'm going to move on to select my data indicators, which is the second step. So location is done. Now we're going to select our indicators. So there's this nice button at the top that says select all indicators. And so you can click that button and get all indicators. There's about 100 in this report. So just note that it may end up being a very long report if you select all 100, but it might also give you sort of a nice overview. You can see here, though, we have some data categories. And so first, just looking at demographic characteristics, I can select the entire category by selecting the checkbox next to the category name, or I can select individual indicators. And so you can see that I opened up that, that category by clicking, again, this little caret button here on the right-hand side. So I can look at each of these individual indicators. And just like in the map room, you'll notice that we have those nice little information buttons as well. So I can click on that little I button and it tells me a little bit about the data itself. So it gives me some attributes. Tells me and gives me total family, households, children under the age of 18. It gives me a nice little map and shows me the area that I've selected so I can check my location. Tells me if it's available by different population groups. And then again, we make sure that we link back to the original source, so the American Community Survey, and you can see the date that it was published. Again, that's the most recent ACS data that we have available. So I can close that, but again, just want to make sure that you knew, you can do a little bit of research up front in terms of making sure you're selecting the right indicators for your report. I can look at indicators in any of these categories, and again, I can select an entire category if I'm interested in doing that, or I can create just a really targeted report with some of these indicators. So for example, if I wanted to focus on that childhood population, I could select here families with children. I could also look at things like population age 5 to 17. Under social and economic factors, I definitely want to look at things like children eligible for free and reduced price lunch. And maybe this indicator here, we'll just do another poverty one for around children and young people not in school and not working. Under neighborhoods and communities, this looks like a lot of information related to housing. We have child care centers that are available, things around transportation and recreation. Clinical care, so looking at access to different types of providers, health professional shortage areas, maybe uninsured children would be a nice one to add here. Different types of prevention and preventable hospital visits. Health behaviors, we can look at things like low food access, food insecurity, and maybe folks that are, or children that are obese here. And then health outcomes, we could look at things like asthma prevalence and maybe some high blood pressure, even though that's just adults here. So you can see that I've selected a nice subset of data indicators to create my report. And that's really that second step. So we've selected our location, then we've selected our indicators. So down here at the bottom, I'm going to click the reports button so I can get to that third step. And we have a couple of options here. So we have the comprehensive report, and that's most likely what you're going to select each time. But I did want to point out that we also have a quick facts report, which is just a series of data tables for the indicators you've selected. So just a quick way to look across all those indicators on through tables. We also have the ability to export this data to an Excel file. So if you're interested, again, in doing some additional analysis or pulling this into another data system, you can do that very easily. And then we have a source and methodology appendix. And so this is nice because it selects the source and methodology information for just those indicators that you've selected and creates an appendix for you. So if you do need to cite where you got this information for a grant application, or you are doing something that needs to be published, this is a great resource for that. But here we're going to go ahead and just select this comprehensive report, and we're going to get a lot of information. So the report populates very quickly, and so you can see here that it reminds us of the location that we've selected, which are these 2 counties in Idaho. And then we get into our actual indicators themselves. So the indicators all sort of follow a template. The first thing that you're going to always see besides the indicator name is what we call a STEM sentence. So it tells us a little bit about the indicator and why it's relevant, or how it relates to the geographic area that you've selected. Underneath that is a data table that represents pretty much the same information that's in that STEM sentence. But what you'll see here is it says report location, and then it has each county. So this report location, since I selected 2 counties, is the aggregate of the 2 counties that I've selected. So that's what is my report location. So you can see here we got total population. We can compare that then to each county. We benchmark that then to the state of Idaho and to the rest of the United States. Underneath that data table, again, a link back to the original source and a show more details that gives us even more information about the data itself and methodology and any notes. We can see that information also represented on a map. So one thing I want to note here is that this data table is giving us county level information, but we actually have this information at a tract level, and so we show the smallest geography that we have available in the map. So if something doesn't look like it adds up, it's because this is looking at county level information and this is looking at tract level information. You can open this map right back into that map room where we were before by clicking the View Larger Map option. And then we get into some population breakouts. So anytime that we can provide information or a data indicator by race, ethnicity, gender, or age, we'll show those breakouts here. Just so you note, all the data visualizations here are interactive. So you can see as I scroll over them, it gives me the actual values themselves. And then I can also, for example, turn off the state of Idaho simply by clicking that name Idaho, and you can see report location in the United States. So just doing a comparison between those 2. As I scroll down, you'll see that we've got lots of breakout information for this one. And I can get down to my families with children here. So again, we have this nice STEM sentence that tells us a little bit about the indicator in context of the geography that we've selected. We have the report location, which is the aggregate of the 2 counties that we've selected. Then we get the individual county information benchmarked to the state of Idaho and the rest of the United States. This benchmarking information can be very helpful, especially if you're talking about these data with your community. You know, most folks, if you tell them that it's 26%, they're not really going to know whether that's a good, bad, or a bad number, or how it compares. And so being able to say, well, the national average is 32 or 31%, people get an idea, okay, we're slightly under that, so we're doing a good job, or we're doing a better job. So those are just some things to note there. At any time, if you want to jump between indicators, you'll notice there's this nice little present button, a circle button down here. And so if I click that, it'll show me all of the indicators that I've selected. So if I go down, for example, to children eligible for free and reduced price lunch, it automatically sort of scrolls me down the page so I can get there quickly. So one of the things that's slightly different here about this indicator is you'll notice that there's a dial here on the right-hand side. So anytime we can benchmark an indicator to say that whether you're doing better than or worse than the state and national averages, we'll do that here in this interactive dial. So you can see here for the report location, the average is children eligible for free and reduced price lunch is around 36–37%. It looks like for the state of Idaho, it's around 45, and for the rest of the United States, it's around 49. So you guys are doing pretty good in that realm. But if you did want to do some programming or think about reducing that number, it looks like you'd want to spend more of your time here in Nez Perce County, right? Because that rate is significantly higher than in Latah County. So you can see there that that helps you sort of start to narrow in or identify specific populations in which you want to serve, or where there's areas of the greatest need. Again, this is interactive, this dial here on the right-hand side. So if I wanted to just compare the report location to the United States, I can turn off Idaho or vice versa. Here you'll see this nice inset map, and this is looking at actual rates by school. So these points are schools themselves. And then this is an example of an indicator where we're able to produce trends over time. And so anytime we do get consistent information across many years, we will produce trends over time. So you can see here from 2010 to about 2017, you can see how trends across each of the counties, right? So each of those counties that we selected compared to the state of Idaho and compared to the rest of the United States. So it's a nice little trend graph there. And again, if you wanted just to compare one county to the state or to the rest of the United States, these are interactive. So again, you can use this nice little hamburger button to jump between different types of indicators. But you can see here, for example, this is a dial that produces a red result. So we can see here that our report location is slightly higher than the state average, but lower than the national average. But we still got that nice red dial to tell us or alert us that that might be a priority area that we would want to spend some time researching or putting some programming together around. I'm going to scroll back up to the top, and I can do that very quickly using this little arrow button here at the bottom. And I'll point out a couple of other resources that we have. So you can download this report as a PDF. So if you wanted to share it with others or publish it on a website or something, you could do that very easily. You can also share it via social media. I always joke this probably isn't the most exciting thing to share via social media, but nonetheless, we've made it easy for you to do. And you can email it to your colleagues to review as well. You can print it, or you can export the data again to Excel if you wanted to do some additional analysis. So I did want to show one other quick community assessment tool functionality. As I showed there, I selected 2 counties in Idaho, but we do have this Draw My Area feature. And so this is of interest if you are working, in, like I said, a non-standard or a smaller geography than a county or a region. And so what I can do here, as you can see, I've sort of zoomed into this same area. And up here where it says Draw Custom Area, I can pull this drop down here, and you can see that I could highlight different cities and towns to select. I could highlight school districts. So if I were interested in pulling a health indicators report for a series of or a single school district, I could do that. Or here I could look at census tracts. So I want to zoom into a couple of census tracts here in this area. And it looks like, let me get back to my, where I was looking here. I can select a couple of different census tracts. My apologies. I'm not as familiar with this area as probably you all are. Here I am. That's where I was looking. So let me turn on my census tracts again, and you can see here that it sort of populates, right, all of those different census tract areas. And so I can find a couple that I'm most interested in here. So I know that there's some interest in this reservation area. And so I can select, for example, a series of, it looks like about 4 census tracts that I've selected. And again, this is just another way to sort of create that nice report area for your health indicators report. So you can see here, if I zoom out, it's going to highlight that area in red that I want to select. And again, I can go through, and my next step would then to be select some data indicators. So for example, I could pick a different population this time to focus on. Maybe I'm interested in looking at Hispanic populations or veterans populations, maybe folks over the age of 65 in this area. I could look at things related to the economy, so things like median family income, maybe some affordable housing, so some housing cost burden type of information, maybe some clinical care information like access to mental health care providers. You know, again, just you can really target the report based on what you're interested in. And then I will again open this comprehensive report. And what you'll see here is that it'll remind me of those census tracts that I've selected, and then all of the maps themselves will also remind me of those census tracts I've selected. But what shows up a little bit differently here is, again, that report location is going to be the total of the census tracts I've selected, and then it's going to give me county information for all of the counties that my area sort of crosses or cuts through. So it looks like there's about 4 counties here that these census tracts cut through. So again, it's a nice way to do some benchmarking to say how well are we doing in comparison to the county next to us, to the counties around us, to the rest of the state and the rest of the United States. Sometimes when you select a small area, you'll get results like this where it says no data. And that means that we actually have no data to report there. The information wasn't collected, and so therefore we can't report it. And then oftentimes too, you'll find maybe a data suppression. Doesn't look like any of them come up here, but if you, sometimes you'll see a note in one of these data tables that says data suppressed. And we'll suppress data if the value is smaller than 5. So a good example of this is in a rural area, there may only be 1 or 2 teen pregnancies in a given year. And so if we were to report the number 1 or the number 2, likely that person or persons would be personally identifiable. And that's really what we're trying to avoid. So we just suppress the data, and what you can see here is that you just know that the value then is smaller than 5 if that data is suppressed. So those are just some highlights. Again, just like with the map room, we have a what's new in reports, and it's a nice little data feed that tells us a little bit about some new indicators that have been added. Or here you can see these are data updates. So we oftentimes get new data, or maybe there's been a correction to data. So like a lot of the unemployment or labor statistics data, they'll do corrections to those every quarter, every 6 months. And so we'll do updates to those as well. So if you ever are wondering whether something's been updated or has a correction to it, you can find it here in this what's new in reports. And then if you ever did want to see the full list of data that are available within the report, there is this nice data list here. So with that, I'm going to pause and turn it over to Mason to talk a little bit about the resources that are available under the resource tab.
Thank you, Jamie. That was quite a lot of material. So if there's any other questions, either at the very end here, if you'd like to email them to me, please let me know. I'll just say briefly that in addition, can you let me share?
Yep.
My screen, maybe? Excellent. I'll just say briefly that in addition to all these great data tools, we want to make this a resource to utilize community-based research and provide some additional tools for community organizations in our region. So on the resource page, this is the customizable part of our data hub. We have several different options. The first is the community survey, and when we had some of our community forums this last week, we discussed the survey. This was a survey, a representative survey that we did in 9 counties in Southeast Washington and North Central Idaho to talk about community needs, and this copy of this survey, as well as some of the single item responses, are located here. In addition, if you have other questions about the survey, I'm happy to do a deeper dive with some of that data. The second aspect is a community research blog. And so we have a number of, well, I'm gonna have one more piece coming up today. The Partnership for Economic Prosperity just completed a housing assessment in the Palouse, and we'll be putting that up there with attribution. We wrote a piece on trauma-informed solutions that includes some information about ACEs, some external information, and then also utilize some of the mapping tools to discuss how those issues might affect this region as well. And then I also have one more piece from Catherine Tackey, and the economist in North Central Idaho. She did an excellent presentation on healthcare workforce. So in the coming months, please keep your eye on this because we'd like to have some useful community research that can show how this can give some more context to this data. 2 other quick pieces here. We included some grant funding links from the foundations involved here, but also some other regional foundation and funders. And some data-oriented research tools on different topics, from evidence-based programs and program evaluation to survey information, with some sites, some useful papers, and also some inventories that you might consider when you're putting together data for proposals or presentations. Finally, I hope that as the site gets utilized, you're able to register. We don't have registration at this point. The site is open and public, but if you'd like to receive some updates, please include that on this Contact Us page. I should notice that one of the items that Jamie, she covered a lot of ground, but she did not discuss the fact that we can upload unique data into the mapping layer, and that requires registration. But for example, we've included some ALICE data from United Way there. And if you have your own data that's available in any of those geographies, we can upload it to that mapping tool, and you can see it alongside the thousands of data layers that Jamie has provided. So with that, I'll just also mention that I think since we're towards the end of our time here today, I would just urge you to contact me if there's any other additional questions. Like I said, the CARES team has been very responsive and supportive. This needs to be a tool for everybody, and I'd be most happy if it gets widely used. So please let me know if there's anything that could make that more helpful for you. I'll just see if there's any other final questions before we wrap it up. Oh, nobody saw my screen. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I showed my screen as you were talking.
Oh, okay,
so.
Great.
Yeah, no problem.
Right. Good. Well, even though this is recorded, was not mistake free. But Jamie, I really appreciate your time today, and I know you covered a lot of material. This is a great tool in my view, and we really appreciate your involvement in sharing your experience and sharing the tool with us. So thank you today.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here and happy to follow up with anybody who may have additional questions about any of the data or the tools if Mason's not available. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.